The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television. Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show. We have the OG of Bernie or Bust, Victor Tiffany, also Revolt against Plutocracy, and this informal interview we're just going to start off in a free form. So, good morning, Victor.
Good morning, Alan. Thanks for having me. Appreciate this.
You're very welcome. You have your coffee ready?
I do. I'm good to go.
Awesome. I have here as part of my screen capture, I have the press release. So for immediate release, or Bust 2020, or why Biden will certainly be defeated. You also mentioned that you might want to talk about Never Biden and the media in general. And so all of those are fine, or anything else that comes up.
Sure.
All right, so let her rip.
Well, one of the things we do in that press release is reference the Wall Street Journal article. And I do want to talk about that because it's emblematic of how the media has covered Bernie or Bust for 5 years now. I didn't tell Betsy Morris, the woman who flew all the way across the country to sit in my office here for 5 hours interviewing me, talking to me, figuring out how we did this. I didn't tell her that 4 years ago, I had 2 interviews with the Wall Street Journal, lengthy interviews. Not a word I spoke went to print. Ditto with Reuters. 2 interviews with Reuters, and another one with Vox. 5 interviews, not one word I spoke. It's not like I'm insane, and it's not like I'm saying ridiculous things, except they must interpret ideas like the Republican and the Democratic parties are 2 wings of the same bird, a political duopoly. That's what I said to Vox, and he couldn't wrap his mind around that. So there is a tendency, it's not even a conspiracy, a consensus in the mainstream media to keep revolutionary voices out from the public sphere, to marginalize it, to sideline it, and to keep things narrowly focused. So what did Betsy Morris quote me after I stressed 4 times with her that Bernie has the advantage in turnout over Biden. Bernie has the advantage in swing voters over Biden. Bernie has the advantage in leverage support, because every candidate has a certain number of supporters who won't vote for the nominee unless it's their candidate. But Bernie has the most by far. In all 3 categories, Bernie's a stronger candidate. Not a word of that made it into the Wall Street Journal article. And that's typical. And so when the left does it, when MSNBC refuses to mention Bernie or Bust, or CNN until it's way too late, their purpose is to make sure the establishment candidate gets the nomination. Wall Street Journal, of course, is owned by, what's his name there? The old man, Rupert Murdoch, who's an ally with Trump. So their suppression of the truth has to do with the fact that Trump does not want to face Bernie Sanders. Trump wants to face Joe Biden, and frankly, who can blame him? And that's another topic. So going down that press release, the first thing we said was, we're going to attack Biden from the left. So we sent this press release out Sunday. Here it is, Wednesday morning. We sent this press release out to 650, actually 60 people now in the media. Received this press release that you referenced. No story. Nobody talking about how the Bernie or Bust group is going to be attacking Biden from the left if he's nominated in the general election. No story about any of that stuff. We had 9 points, other points as to why Biden cannot beat Trump. And of course, the big one, and I want to address this because I think we have an opportunity here with this COVID shutdown of the economy to at least try to make a difference, whether it actually works or not. It dawned on me last night, holy mackerel, there are millions of people at home in quarantine with what? Watching TV? If they're online, they can actually do something to help Bernie without being Bernie or bust. So the topic and the main point of our press release as to why Joe Biden cannot defeat Donald Trump is because, as you've been pointing out on your show for a couple of weeks now, Biden is suffering from some sort of cognitive decline. It's evident almost every time he shows video. I don't even understand what his campaign is doing. They're showing his campaign is releasing videos, flaws and all. They're not even doing multiple takes. Yeah. Or if they are doing multiple takes, Biden just can't get it right.
They might be doing multiple takes, and that's the best he can do, which is very sad.
It's scary.
Yeah.
And why isn't MSNBC covering this?
Let's agree that the biggest problem is the fact that the corporate media are a propaganda machine and that their whole point is to manufacture our consent. And I've got a little clip that I want to show. I'll probably pop that in here. And it's from the Real News Network. And the main thrust of it is that like George Stephanopoulos and people like that who've been running the debates, they have a strong interest to scare the American people with socialism and other things that will serve their agenda. So you've got Rupert Murdoch, you've got the guy that Bezos, who owns the Washington Post. You've got all of these oligarchs who own the manufacturing of consent. Caitlin Johnstone calls it the consent managers. So instead of calling them journalists or pundits, we need to start calling them consent managers. And so they, as you've noted, they have an agenda going in. They have a story that they want to tell. They want to manufacture a certain narrative managers. So they go in with their narrative that they want. They go in with the story that they want to tell, the way they want to tell it. And then they use you as a foil, and they use others as a foil if they pay attention to them at all. Otherwise, they just ignore us completely. But when they use us, like Betsy Morris, she had an agenda going in. She had a story that she wanted to tell, and so she drove to your office and stayed there for 5 hours because she was hoping to get any kind of tidbits that she could to tell her story. She had no intention ever of telling your story because it doesn't do what her corporate masters want to do.
Right.
No, instead, we're going to explore how the role of one of the most adroit enablers of inequality, the mainstream media, how they had a hand in putting us in this bind. How, despite evidence to the contrary, the media pundits who control the most powerful outlets in the world not only misled the public, but through disinformation have dissuaded us from building a social infrastructure that would make us much better prepared for the crisis we are facing today. And to do so, we're going back in time just a month ago when ABC anchor George Stephanopoulos started off the Democratic debate with a question. And it wasn't about how our greed-infused medical system was the most expensive and ineffective in the world. And it wasn't to press the aspiring candidates about why tens of millions of low-wage workers do not have paid sick leave. No, his question was apparently much more pressing. Let's watch.
First, President Trump certainly thinks this label socialism will work. At the State of the Union, he said socialism destroys nations. He's never going to let socialism destroy American healthcare. And before the Super Bowl, he joked with Sean Hannity about your honeymoon in Moscow. Those hits are going to keep coming if you're the nominee. Why shouldn't Democrats be worried?
Because Donald Trump lies all the time.
Is anyone else on the stage concerned about having a Democratic socialist at the top of the Democratic ticket?
And so in a country with mass incarceration, a broken healthcare system that extorts patients, and a racist criminal justice system, and now an economy that is virtually at a standstill, this highly paid media pundit decided to fixate on the one idea that could actually save us: socialism. I mean, think about it. Probably quite soon, as our economy falls apart and the capitalist herd starts stampeding towards the public trough, what will the former champions of greed be clamoring for? Socialism, bailouts, public dollars funneled into private wallets. Of course, this will more than likely be the uniquely American version of socialism, which includes big handouts to banks and Wall Street and nothing for the working class.
That's I can't say it any better. I think that's spot on.
And so what we're trying to do is figure out how to combat that. Our story, we know our story, and we have our narrative, and our narrative is based on what's actually happening in the world. And then we see the corporate narrative, and we think, well, that's not right. How are we going to fix this? how are we going to unspin this? And Betsy apparently and her Columbia law professor or journalism professor, whoever he was, they're trying to unspin us. We're apparently threatening enough that they want to figure out how to keep us from coming in on their business. It's like mafia. They're the mafia, and they have a business model. And then if we figure out how to unspin their narrative, we're a threat. And it was clear to me, and this is something that we could probably take some pride in, that they're threatened by what we're doing. At least we have loud enough voices that they felt the need to try to spin their narrative against us.
Loud enough voices through our networks. And that is one thing, that the one benefit we got out of that story in the Wall Street Journal was the extent of our networks. We are a threat to Joe Biden because we have extensive networks that she was able to document fairly well. That's the one decent point of this, but it didn't help in terms of sharing our press release with 600 plus journalists. It didn't help any, none of them paid any attention to it, almost as if they don't give a shit. I want to talk about the change, what's happened, because we've been saying, you and I both have been saying for months, under current economic conditions, only Bernie beats Trump, regardless of who the other nominee might be. Only Bernie beats Trump because it's going to be a close election. COVID-19 has changed that dynamic. All of a sudden, 2020 has shifted from being the election of 2016, which was close, and those swing voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania swung the election, right, to 2008, where a full quarter of Hillary Clinton's racist supporters refused to vote for Barack Obama, then Senator Obama,
Puma,
and voted directly for John McCain. That's way more than the Bernie or bust and the Sanders-Trump swing voters combined, because that's a full swing. And it didn't work in 2008 because the economy was actually in better shape than our economy is going to be in come November.
Way better.
We're looking at some serious problems here because of government willingness to shut down. I think we're going to be on our way back, but we're going to be this is 2008 more than 2016. So our narrative has had to change. We have to look at the big picture. If you go back again and look at that article that you cited at the beginning of this conversation, there's 9 reasons why Biden's unelectable.
Yeah, first reason.
It's not just the Bernie or bust and the swing voters. It's his lack of empathy for young people. It's his willingness to veto Medicare for all, which is a litmus test for God knows how many progressives. It's his cognitive decline, and the Republican super PACs and the Sanders campaign are just going to be spinning, or not spinning, but looping that over and over and over, whichever slur or misstatement or forgotten name, like Biden forgets Obama's name on video. Right?
I'm an Biden-Obama Democrat. Do you remember when he said, I'm an Biden-Obama Democrat? Oh, I've lost you.
How about now?
Ah, there you are.
Okay, anybody who thinks, I'm getting messages that my internet is unstable.
Okay.
So anybody who thinks Biden can defeat Trump just isn't paying attention. So I have a suggestion for everybody who supports Bernie Sanders. You don't have to be Bernie or bust to be part of this messaging. We've got to get, in fact, David Packman, he's not Bernie or bust, he's anti-Bernie or bust, but he talked about COVID-19 as a possible black swan to benefit Bernie Sanders. And what it's giving us is this delay in the primary process. It may not matter in the end, but it's an opportunity for 2 things. One, we've got millions of people sitting around with nothing better to do. So if you're a supporter of Bernie Sanders, you don't have to be Bernie or bust. You don't have to be a Sanders-Trump swing voters. But what you can do is reach out either on Twitter or Facebook or phone calls or emails to MSNBC and reach out to @Maddow, @Lawrence, @Chris L. Hayes. Those are the Twitter addresses. and tell them, don't ask, demand that they start covering Biden's cognitive decline. We don't know exactly what's behind that. We're not doctors. We don't know if it's early onset senility or Alzheimer's. We can't go there because we just don't know. But you don't have to be a doctor to see something's wrong any more than you have to be a rocket scientist to appreciate, that thing going up in the air. Right? You just have to be observant to see something's going on. And when Joe Biden speaks, there's clearly something going on compared to this guy 4 years ago. Because of the economy crashing, the Joe Biden of 2016 could have beaten Donald Trump this year. He could have.
What do you think about the Michael Moore angle? The fact that Michael Moore has insider discussions with people and knows from them that they know that Biden is losing his marbles, and then their plan is to have a bright, he called her a brainiac, a female vice president who's a brainiac who will reassure everyone that even though Biden obviously is losing it, and this is straight from the horse's mouth, and Michael Moore is connected to lots of DNC insiders through his Hollywood connections and just through his celebrity. He knows a lot of people. So he's saying that the insiders know that Joe is losing it, but they've got this bright young woman, they say, is going to save everything. And so to me, that rules out Hillary, that rules out Elizabeth, obviously. So well, I'm just curious how you feel about the fact that the insiders know that Biden's losing it, and they're just trying to spin that away from the general public.
Well, the general public isn't stupid. They're not. You talk about the wine track voters and how they're listening to MSNBC and CNN, and of course those networks aren't covering Biden's cognitive decline. So at a certain point, they don't know yet. But from the DNC, if there is a DNC in July, until the general election, if there is a general election in November, there's going to be nonstop playing of Biden's cognitive decline evidence. Everyone's going to know this. Swing voters are going to know this. Everyone's going to know this. What they're hiding isn't going to help that they have a bright young female running for VP, because he's not going to get elected. The American people are not going to elect a man suffering from serious, obvious mental decline. So, I mean, obviously, Trump's not the most stable individual in the world, regardless of his claim to the contrary. But he's the known unstable entity. We don't know how far Biden's going to decline, and they can say, "Oh, well, I'm just going to step in all they want." But that's a big what's it called? Bait and switch, right? Biden's the bait, but we're going to switch him over as soon. It's not going to happen. I don't think Biden's going to make it to the general election. I think the plan is, because like you just said, Moore's pointing out that the DNC insiders know Biden's in decline. They know this. So they're uniting behind a candidate probably can't defeat Trump, which means the whole purpose of this, and we have a meme art pointing this out, if they're uniting behind a guy who can't defeat Trump, then the only purpose of these party insiders is to beat Bernie Sanders.
Right.
That's all they're trying to do here, is to beat Sanders.
That's the obvious point to make next, is that they know they have no intention of doing anything other than making sure Trump gets it, because then their gig flow keeps flowing. They still know what to do. Trump is such a good person for them to oppose. So instead of having anything to actually say in terms of policy or plans, all they really want to do is have Trump there to yell at, because then they keep having a job. Why they consider Bernie to be an
after the election.
Right? They'll still be fine with Trump in office. They'll still be fine. Their gig flow will continue. So why they consider Bernie to be an existential threat is because it threatens them. They're not going to have jobs anymore. They're not going to have influence anymore. They won't be invited to nice parties anymore. So the Chris Matthews of the world, the DNC pundit class, is going to be out of influence. They're not going to have, they'll still have enough money, but they're not going to have their their wonderful invitations to everything, and nobody will listen to them anymore. And that's why they're afraid. And then the oligarchs, we know why they're afraid of Bernie. And so what they're doing together, the collusion between the pundits and the oligarchs, is that they have to keep Bernie out, and they're fine with Trump. They may rather have Biden, and whoever the VP is for Biden, they may rather have a Democrat. They probably would rather have a Democrat, but they know damn well they're not going to get Biden. So they're absolutely fine with continuing with Trump as opposed to having Bernie. I think this is the part that our lefty pundits that we follow don't say often enough. I don't think they say, like Krystal Ball and Saagar and Jimmy Dore and all of our favorite lefty pundits, I don't think they're saying often enough that it's blatantly obvious that the DNC insiders are trying to get Trump, that they absolutely prefer Trump.
Well, that's all apparent, right? The only reason anyone could disagree with anything you said is a hypothetical situation, which I'll present. And which is the plan is to defeat Bernie or use Biden to defeat Bernie between now and the DNC. And then Biden's going to conveniently drop out and the DNC will make a backroom deal. It won't be Bernie, of course, but they'll make some sort of backroom deal, maybe making his VP choice the nominee. I don't think they're going to run Biden. It just doesn't make sense to run somebody they know who can't win. But this is hypothetical. Right now, it's guesswork. What you just framed is how we should think, because that's what we're seeing, right? They're uniting behind a guy who cannot defeat Donald Trump for a variety of reasons, primarily his mental health.
What do you think? What do you think is going to happen if they do that? If the DNC has no intention of running Biden, if they want to run somebody else, anyone but Bernie? What do you think the Bernie or bust crowd will do? What do you think the regular Bernie supporters will do, the vote blue Bernie supporters? And then what do you think the rest of the suburban comfortable Democrats will do if they try to do a switcheroo on us?
Well, it's going to depend on the economy. I don't think it's going to bounce back the way Trump seems to think it's going to.
Yeah.
So if we're still in a recession come November, I think we're looking at 2008. I think the Democrat will take the election.
Okay. So then what? What do you think the people want to break off and start a new party? We're talking about yellow vests. We're talking about general strikes. We're talking about people who are utterly and purely pissed off at the DNC's rigging of things. What is that crowd of ultra leftists going to do in the event that a Democrat defeats Donald Trump, a corporate Democrat defeats Donald Trump?
Well, hopefully they'll be more effective at party building. Movement for People's Party just voted to unite with Burn the DNC on their conference call this week. They're going to have to set aside differences with other people on the left and form, if we're going to actually challenge this political duopoly of this neoliberal, centrist, Republican, Democratic duopoly, they're going to have to unite the left, the progressive left. And it's like herding cats.
Yeah.
And we tried to do this. I was part of a think tank in 2018, 2019 to try to get the Movement for the People's Party and the Socialist Party and the Green Party and the PIP, Progressive Independent Party, to come together, set aside our differences, and form an American Syriza, a coalition of radical parties to challenge this political duopoly. And we hit a snag. There are people who just refuse to work with other people. I'm not going to name names because going forward, hopefully some of these people will wake up and set aside they probably don't consider them petty differences, but they're going to have to work with people they don't like in order to challenge from the left this pernicious centrist corporate ideology, whether it's neo-fascism currently of the Republican Party or the 40 plus years of neoliberalism of the Democratic Party. Either one are going to destroy this climate.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this in terms of economic populism because of Ball and Saagar Engeti's new book on populism. Saagar is an avowed righty and Krystal is an avowed lefty, and they wrote a book together, and they're trying to come together across what do you call social ideology. They have a different way of looking at their social politics, but they agree on their economic politics. So that might be one way to bridge the gap on the left, because you might even be able to bridge the gap with economic populists on the right then. And if you had the righties and the lefties who are economic populists agreeing to put aside their social differences and work together on an economic platform, then that might work better than what you were involved with.
That's much easier said than done. Because abortion is so important to people on the right. Immigration is so important to people on the right. And it's hard to set aside things like, especially immigration, because it's not just social, it's also an economic consideration. These people harvest our crops,
I think we could deal with the economic, if we just said, okay, let's deal with immigration, but let's just deal with it on an economic basis. Because Bernie used to say that we should have closed borders. Bernie used to say that we need to not lower wages for American workers. But once he figured out that if we could just put a floor underneath the minimum wage and we could say $15 for everybody, then what would actually happen is the immigrants would come in and they would have fair wages, and the rising tide would lift all the ships. Everyone's economic interests would be served. So if we just deal with immigration from an economic point of view, I think the right and the left would have a better chance of agreeing, because facts are facts. If we can persuade good faith discussion that isn't racist, that isn't fearful, but just really hard-nosed, nuts and bolts economic solutions, we could make the case across the political aisle. Smart people, reasonable people on both sides of the political aisle could agree that if we can put a floor under the minimum wage, we would actually benefit economically from all the work that migrant workers do that U.S. workers don't want to do, and that is absolutely essential work. Our economy would tank instantly if we didn't have that part of our labor force in place. I think we really could, even though you say it's very difficult. I think it would be easier than the woke signaling and the other kind of, like you mentioned, abortion. We could talk about LGBTQ plus rights. We could talk about non-binary people and trans people, and all of those issues are important to me personally, but I can see how they would bog us down right away if we ever started to form a coalition. And to me, the best chance then would be to form a coalition purely on economic populism. Instead of making it a woke signaling war, we could make it a class war and an age war, because we have the young people are getting fucked right and left by our economy. So if we could figure out how to make economic justice for young people and economic justice for working people, and we made that the whole point, and tried to set aside the social differences, I think we'd have a better chance than what you were trying to do.
Maybe. It's hard to say. I think it's easier for transpartisan cooperation and trans-ideological cooperation, where there's an overlap, as you're laying out, on a bill-by-bill approach, addressing immigration as a bill. As a party, I just don't see the left and the right working together in that kind of organizational structure. I hope I'm wrong. That'd be great if I'm wrong, but I just don't see that possibility because of the differences we have on so many other layers and levels. Even our personality types are different. Our levels of fear are different. Liberals from conservatives. There's so many really non-issue differences, non-economic issue differences that are overlaps. It's just, again, I think we can work on issues, minimum wage or whatever, cross-partisan, cross-ideological, but I don't think we can do it within the context of a single organization.
Okay, I agree with.
Very difficult.
I don't think you're wrong. I think that it would be impossible to start a political party that was called the Economic Populist Party. But I do believe that we could have a cross-coalition movement. I think if we had the economic populist movement, then we could work within the duopoly or a new party if it ever got any traction, which is doubtful. But if we did have a movement, and this is where you were talking about the merger of the what is it?
Movement for a People's Party.
Yeah, Movement for a People's Party. If we have a merger with them and burn the DNC and Bernie or bust and the other members of the coalition you were trying to start, a movement would be easier to sustain and to put aside our differences with than would a new political party.
That's true. And what would a movement do? Advocate for specific populist policies, minimum wage, healthcare for all, and things like that. No, I think that's a possibility of going forward. I think we're going to have to do something. I want to talk about another strategy or tactic that you've been advocating for the last week or so, and that's the general strike. Because I'm not ambivalent about it. I just think we have different kinds of things going on with this COVID, and you got idiots on the right who want to push people back into the workforce before this damn pandemic settles down. So right now, a general strike is going to be a health strike. We're staying home. Screw you guys. I'm not going out into this dangerous world just because Wall Street wants to start making a profit. So I don't think the kind of general strike you have in mind now is going to be interpreted properly. But I'm all for it now so that we can start what's it like to not go to work, intentionally not go to work. Like a potential health general strike can serve as a practice for a revolt general strike. So you asked me, what happens if Biden drops out and a Harris Booker ticket defeats Trump? Well, general strike would be a good way to shut things down if they start coming after things, promoting things like the Trans-Pacific Partnership or any of these other neoliberal pro-corporate strategies. I think a general strike is something that the left needs to start adding to our toolkit of radical tactics. So I'm glad you're promoting that. I just think the timing, because of COVID-19, I think the timing is, in some ways, is good because a health general strike can serve as, as I just said, as a practice run. Hey, what's it like to intentionally stay home and tell the boss to fuck himself?
I like that idea. I think you're right. It's a warm up. We'll just get practiced up. Yeah.
If they call us back to work too early, and I don't mean me because I'm a frontline worker. I have to go to work every day. But the general population, if Trump and his Wall Street allies want us to go back to work too early, then this is a good practice run for something that eventually has to be more an economic revolt, a populist revolt against, it could be something that Trump does if he's reelected, or something that the neoliberal Democratic establishment does if Biden's replaced. Because if Biden's not replaced, Trump's reelected, you can put money on that. You can absolutely bet on that. If you're listening out there and you're a Republican and you know somebody, a Democrat, who says, yeah, Biden's going to beat Trump, go ahead and take that bet. Put as much money down on it as you possibly can. Take that bet, because there's no way this current rendition of Joe Biden 2020 I don't think he can win office for dog catcher, and he certainly isn't fit for public office, and that's going to become apparent in a contest where the Republicans are going to lay it out there, as I already said.
Yep. So, once the orange anal wart gets a hold of him, it's all over.
It's just going to be It's going to be a slaughter.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand. Well, I do understand it, but it's so unethical for Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell and Chris Hayes to not be talking about this obvious elephant in the room. And again, I want to stress, if you're a Bernie supporter, you don't have to be Bernie or bust and try to get the media to start talking about Joe Biden's cognitive decline. Just start, whether you use Facebook, whether you use phone, the phone. Nobody's making phone calls to voters right now. So use this opportunity presented by this pandemic to be active in a new and creative way. Get phone calls out to, or tweets, or emails if you can get their email address, or on comments on Facebook. One way or another, reach out to these hosts, these MSNBC hosts, or even Michael Moore. He knows this now. He's got this, and he's a guest on these shows. Get them to start talking about this to the public media before the primaries turn back on again. Because as David Packman suggested very recently, this could be a black swan moment. Yeah. This is an opportunity, and we have to embrace it. We have two things here: Joe Biden's lost mind, and the fact that there are probably millions of people quarantined with nothing better to do but to start reaching out. And I don't mean once, tweet Maddow once today. I mean today, tomorrow, the next day. Just hammer them. Keep it up. Don't stop. Let these goddamn television hosts know that their lies of omission are unacceptable.
Yes. Well, let's say the Black Swan moment caused the Bernie or Bust television show to go viral. Let's say that every United States baby boomer just suddenly, for whatever reason, because they have nothing better to do, started to watch this show. Let's go over some of the things that you've mentioned here. 1 to 2 million Bernie or Bust voters who will vote Green, Socialist, or not at all. So
that range has to do with the fact that we know there's a million.
Yeah.
We don't know about the second million because the Bernie or Bust generation haven't been polled. So we don't know if there's 10 of them, 10,000 of them, 100,000, or a million. But there's a sizable number of young people. If it's not Bernie, they're staying home.
Okay.
So 1 to 2
all right.
million.
And then a 1.25 to 1.5 million Sanders to Trump swing voters who told pollsters that they plan to repeat that strategy this year. Obama to Trump voters are going to support Trump in the contest with Biden. It's an almost automatic choice.
From Rachel Bittkoffer.
Right.
This isn't Victor Tiffany.
No, her numbers are good. Rachel is a good an analyst and a good statistician. So Obama to Trump voters are going to support Trump. It's almost an automatic choice. Millions of poor and poorly educated voters, according to Thomas Piketty, will not vote for a status quo candidate like Biden. And that's why Trump won last time. We've got the poor and poorly educated voters who will not vote for a status quo candidate. They want actual hope and change. Biden is putting together Hillary Clinton's losing coalition, which Hillary told us herself. Biden has told young people he has no empathy for them. I've shown that clip on this show. Biden has said he would veto Medicare for all. So if you're on the left and you're part of the Bernie army, whether you're Bernie or Bust or not, you can't vote for somebody who's going to veto Medicare for all.
Well, it's a litmus test for how many people. You see it on Twitter a lot.
Yep.
If you're not Medicare for all, I'm not supporting you. It's a litmus test for God knows how many progressives.
And even Republicans. Even Republicans want Medicare for all. And then the deepest nail in Biden's electability coffin may be his obvious cognitive decline. You can bet Honey Badger Trump won't hold back on Biden's dementia. For more on this key topic about Biden's unelectability, see Stop Calling It a Stutter. Do you remember? And I'm going to ask you in a second. And then Joe Biden will lose a general election to Donald Trump. They can click on these, but I can't remember who the authors are. And
Paul Street is the first author.
Okay.
That I quote there, the Honey Badger. Caitlin Johnstone, Don't Call It a Stutter.
Right.
And the third one was Jacobin. I don't know who the author was.
Oh, okay. And then the last point, Biden cannot plausibly offer change. he can only offer more of the same, and most Americans do not want more of the same. I predicted last time that a populist would win the general election, and my blue dog vote blue Democrat Facebook people were pissed off when I said that. They said Trump is in no way a populist, and I said, well, true, and neither was Barack Obama, but they ran as populists, and so somebody who runs as a populist is going to win the next general election too. It's going to be either a true populist or a fake populist, or two fake populists running against each other. Then who knows? But I don't think the DNC is going to run anybody that even pays lip service to populist talking points.
Somebody just advised Biden to run on Bernie's platform.
Yeah, and it would help him.
It would. I mean, some people would believe it. They believe Obama.
Yeah. The people who vote, the main people who vote, the older people, especially in primaries, will believe whatever Rachel Maddow tells them, or Chris Hayes. But what we might think about as we're going forward is, how do we put pressure? You started listing off the Twitter accounts of people we should talk to. I think I'll put a list at the end of this show. What do you want our lefty pundits to say? We've got, you said that Krystal Ball talked about leaving the top line blank, and you don't advocate for that, but at least she's saying don't vote for Biden. And so is Kyle Kulinski, even though he's a sheepdog. He's saying don't vote for Biden. Jimmy Dore won't come out and criticize Cenk Uygur, who's obviously a sheepdog. And Jimmy Dore won't say Bernie or bust on his show. So just as a prompt, what do you want the lefty pundits to be told by the viewers of the Bernie or Bust show? What do you want us to tweet, not to the MSDNC people, but directly to the people we watch on a daily basis?
So if Biden's the nominee, the reason it's not just the one reason he's going to lose, right? In this economy, it should be a landslide. Anybody can beat Trump. And it looks like they're uniting around the one candidate who can't beat Trump for that list of reasons you just gave.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say, if you're going to reach out to a David Dole or Kyle Kulinski and ask them to start covering something, have them start covering the Sanders-Trump swing voters, right? They haven't covered them yet. Right. They treat them like they're lepers or something. Oh, God, we can't talk about them. I think there's a big misunderstanding of those voters. Like they're toxic to Bernie's chances of winning.
It's elitism.
Fact, it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
Without those voters, Trump loses or Biden loses, or if the economy comes back and it looks like things are promising again for Trump, and he can claim, see, I fought the virus and now the economy. If he's able to make that argument, then we're back to only Bernie beats Trump. So again, those swing voters will have an impact. And so will Bernie or bust voters. There's these people, whether it's Jimmy Dore or any of these people. I mean, like you said I think yesterday, Nico House is the only one who's actually covered Bernie or bust. We're Tim Black. Why aren't you talking about Bernie or bust? Why Kyle Kulinski? I don't care if he argues against Bernie or bust. Why isn't he even talking about it? And Jimmy Dore has no goddamn excuse to not talk about Bernie or bust. He argued in favor of Bernie or bust in 2016. Now he won't even talk about it. So these progressive pundits need to be pressured to talk about Bernie's leverage, either the leverage he packs in his suitcases without our help, the Sanders-Trump swing voters, or the movement we built, the Bernie or bust movement. They need to start talking about these people in addition to all the other things on that list, because they are talking about the other stuff. It's the leverage that either Sanders has innately or the constructed leverage of Bernie or bust that they just refuse to talk about. And I don't understand why. I think they need to be told, look, Jimmy, get Alan Howe, the host of Bernie or Bust show, as a guest on your show and talk about Bernie or Bust. They need to be pressured.
Yeah,
And I don't know what leverage you can use. With MSNBC, it's easy to say, look, if you don't cover Joe Biden's cognitive decline, we're just not going to watch you anymore. And maybe that's what needs to be said to Jimmy Dore. Maybe that's what needs to be said to Kyle Kalinske or Mike Figueroa. I don't know why these people, or what it's going to take to get these people to start talking about this movement and these swing voters. But that's what I recommend. Just, again, don't ask, demand. Start talking about, if it's mainstream media, Biden's cognitive decline, and if it's the progressive pundits that you've been talking about, to start talking about Bernie or bust, and have Alan Howell as a guest on your show.
I think you can shame them a little bit. I think if we're sharing this to them, like if the viewers want to tweet at people, they could tweet the URL to this interview, and I think if they watch it, if David Dole watches it, or Kyle Kalinske watches it, or Mike Figueroa watches it, what they should hear from us is that we think they're being elitist. I think they don't want to talk about the swing voters because they come from kind of the same backgrounds as the bigger dogs up the chain. They have good educations. They probably come from good schools. They probably are not from, maybe, I don't know for sure about Krystal Ball. I think she grew up in Kentucky. She seems a little bit more populist and more grubby than some of the others in her upbringing. But she's well educated. She's polished like they are. I think part of their problem is that they have kind of a little bit of Hillary's problem. They have a little bit of a condescending attitude. And for that reason, they don't feel like talking about them. It feels like maybe they'll get their hands dirty. And if that bothers them enough to say, well, no, that's not it. That's not why we're talking about Bernie or bust, I think that would be wonderful. But whatever we can do to goad them into covering it would be great.
Well, I mean, what I don't get is, this is, if they start talking about this and it filters up toward mainstream media, this is not going to hurt Bernie Sanders. This is going to help Bernie Sanders. Again, this could be a black swan moment in this campaign, this COVID-19 delay in the primaries. But if we don't embrace it, and I don't mean those who are listening, but these lefty pundits, they have to start letting these swing or these wine track voters, however they can reach them. Maybe they can tell their audiences, hey, get your aunt and uncle on the phone if they're in New York or some other state that hasn't voted yet. Get them on the phone and let them know Joe Biden just cannot be elected, right? So this thing can spread and get Bernie the nomination, because the only way he's going to get the nomination is if this primary completely flips, right? People give up on Joe Biden for whatever reason, and understand, because of that list of items you just read, that he's not the electable candidate. That fact of the matter is,
he's not the electable candidate.
Not even close. So the wine track voters, the middle class suburban voters, need to find this out, and it's going to have to come from the bottom up, from these lefty progressives up through, hopefully, filtering. See, if mainstream media will talk about Biden's cognitive decline, and the progressive media is already talking about that, but throws in other items on that list, including the swing voters, including the Bernie or busters, then we can flip this thing around. But if they don't talk about it, then we've already seen from the last 2 months what's going to happen. They're going to nominate Joe Biden, and he's going to lose to Trump. That's what I told Betsy Morris. If she wanted to know what I thought was going to happen, I said, I think they're going to nominate Biden and lose.
She didn't want to know.
I'm a betting person, and that's my bet. But my hope is, my hope is not my betting. I hope to lose that bet.
Right.
I hope people will wake up and start talking about that list of 9 reasons you just read, and Biden and the mainstream media start talking about Biden's cognitive decline. He's just not fit to be president. I don't care how much you hate Donald Trump. It doesn't matter that there's enough people who are going to look at Joe Biden talking about, these truths are self-evident that all men and women are you
know the thing.
You know the thing.
And it's hairy legs.
How does a candidate for president of a major party not know that line? Because he's losing it. Yeah. And it's going to be so clear between the DNC or the virtual DNC or whatever it is in July and November. It's going to be so clear. Biden's just not going to have a chance. I think, again, he's going to drop out intentionally. I think it's the plan to defeat Bernie, drop out, and then basically if the economy doesn't bounce back the way Trump fantasizes, then, anybody. Harris can beat Trump. Anybody in because we're in a 2008 election, any of these candidates, anyone but Biden. It's so fascinating to me that the elites and the establishment are uniting around the one candidate who can't beat Trump. Yep. And it's just mind-boggling to me. It speaks of a deep. Well, it just speaks of not a conspiracy, but a consensus that Bernie Sanders must be defeated.
Right. That's the
even
big
if it
picture.
Means we lose the election.
Yeah, they feel like they have to beat Bernie, and so they
right.
coalesced around the candidate. They didn't do it because Biden is the worst to defeat Trump. They did it because Biden was the best to defeat Bernie.
That's right. That's right. And that's so corrupt. That's so, what do you have a party for? So you can organize and win elections.
Yeah.
That's not what they're doing.
Nope.
That's not what the Democrats are doing.
Nope. We need to throw them out.
Yep.
All right. Well, that was wonderful. I enjoyed that very much. I hope you have a good day at work today, and hope you stay safe and healthy and happy.
I tell you, it's like living in a science fiction movie. We're at war with a fucking invisible enemy.
Yeah.
That's out to kill us.
Yeah.
I'm 64 and an ex-smoker, so I don't know, but if I could even survive this thing, and yet I'm out in it. So I didn't go to the school I did and take up this profession that I'm in order to be a frontline worker, but here I am.
Well, all power to you.
Thanks.
Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Oh, get on board the Bernier bus train. The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.